For the last few weeks in class, we've been learning about ancient Mesopotamia. It's a region of Southwest Asia that is today referred to as the Middle East. We're going to take the next few class periods and learn a little bit about what that same area, that Fertile Crescent, cradle of civilization area in ancient times, politically, geographically, what that area looks like today. I'll be reading this article aloud to you. You can read on your own. I've also posted this for you in Google Classroom so you can read it on your own. But if you would like me to read it to you, I'll be reading and explaining some things, which is the purpose of this recording. 5 things you need to know about the Middle East. You can turn on the TV, check the news online, or pick up a newspaper. No other part of the world generates as many headlines as the Middle East. Here's a look at this critical, troubled region and why it's so important to the United States. Reason 1. What is the Middle East? The term Middle East describes a region on the eastern and southern shores of the Mediterranean Sea. The countries generally considered to make up the Middle East are mostly in Asia, but also in Africa and even Europe, where part of Turkey, a country in Europe, is located. More than geography, it's cultural ties and historical rivalries that define the Middle East. The majority of the people there are Arabs. The region also includes non-Arab countries like Iran, Turkey, and Israel. Most people in the Middle East are Muslims, followers of Islam. But significant numbers of Christians also live throughout the region. And in Israel, more than 75% of the people are Jewish. Reason 2. How has the Arab Spring changed the Middle East? The movement known as the Arab Spring actually began in the winter. In December 2010, a young fruit vendor in Tunisia set himself on fire to protest corruption and lack of freedom in his country. The incident led to widespread demonstrations that forced Tunisia's dictator to resign. Tunisia's revolution sparked similar protests in Egypt and around the region in early 2011. That wave of protests, called the Arab Spring, resulted in the overthrow of dictators in Egypt, Libya, and Yemen. Right now, attention is focused on Syria, where a pro-democracy movement also sprang up in 2011 against Bashar al-Assad, the longtime ruler. Assad met protests with violence, igniting a civil war that so far has killed more than 60,000 Syrians and created more than 1 million refugees. Iran and Russia support Assad, and experts fear that Syria's violence could spread to neighboring countries. Will the Arab Spring bring democracy to the Middle East? It's not clear. With many governments in a state of flux, radical Muslim groups have been taking advantage of the confusion. The U.S. is concerned that these extremists might impose strict Islamic law, as in Iran, and provide a safe haven to terrorist groups such as Al-Qaeda, which staged the 9/11 attacks on the U.S. in 2001. Still, the U.S. has been supporting groups working for democracy in the Middle East. Along with many in the region, the U.S. hopes that good and lasting change will come soon, if not immediately. Rami Kahori, a scholar in Lebanon, is hopeful that change is coming. Quote, "We are slowly witnessing the unprecedented birth of the Arab citizen," Kahori says. "We will achieve 2 long elusive Arab goals: self-determination and real sovereignty." Reason number 3. Why can't Arabs and Israelis make peace? The Arab-Israeli conflict has smoldered for more than a century. Israelis and Arabs have repeatedly clashed over the small area that includes Israel, the West Bank, and the Gaza Strip. The conflict has resulted in 3 major Arab-Israeli wars, along with countless terrorist attacks on Israeli citizens, raids, and airstrikes in retaliation, and grieving families on both sides. For thousands of years, this area was the ancient homeland of the Jewish people. In 63 BC, the region was seized by the Romans, who came to call it Palestine. Following a Jewish rebellion in 70 AD, the Romans destroyed the Second Temple and expelled most of the Jewish people. After Arab armies conquered the region in 636 AD, Palestine became dominated by Arab and Islamic culture, though Christians and Jews have always remained there as well. During the 1800s, a steady stream of Jews immigrated to Palestine from Europe, seeking to escape anti Semitism and restore a Jewish homeland. From the start, conflicts erupted with Arabs there. After World War II, from 1939 to 1945, and the Holocaust, during which 6 million Jewish people were killed, the idea of a Jewish state gained wider support. Jews moved to Palestine in increasing numbers. In 1947, the United Nations, or the UN, voted to divide Palestine into two nations, Jewish and Arab. Jews accepted the plan, but neighboring Arab countries rejected it. When Israel declared its independence in 1948, Egypt, Jordan, and Syria attacked the new nation. The war ended in 1949 with an Israeli victory. During the fighting, at least 600,000 Palestinian Arabs had fled from or were forced out of Israel, becoming refugees. Today, Israelis and Palestinians maintain a tense standoff. About 2.5 million Palestinians live in the West Bank, which Israel captured in the Six Day War of 1967. Israel controls the area's borders, and Israelis have built settlements on what Palestinians considered their land. The Gaza Strip is controlled by Hamas, a Palestinian group that calls for Israel's destruction and is considered a terrorist organization by the United States. Hamas periodically fires rockets onto Israeli towns, provoking crackdowns from the Israeli military. Both Jews and Palestinians claim Jerusalem in Israel as their capital. The struggle over this ancient city, holy to Jews, Christians, and Muslims, stirs great emotions. Many Israelis and Palestinians, and the US, support, quote, a two-state solution that would involve creating a Palestinian nation from most of the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. But that's becoming less likely as the distrust between the two peoples deepens. Diplomats around the world have called for the US, a longtime ally of Israel, to broker a compromise. That goal has eluded every American president who has tried to intervene in this long conflict. Reason 4. Is oil the main reason we care about the Mideast? Although oil is not the only reason the US and its allies care about the Middle East, it's still very important. More than half of known oil reserves are in the countries around the Persian Gulf, including Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Iran, and the United Arab Emirates, or the UAE. Nearly 20% of oil traded worldwide is transported through the Strait of Hormuz between Iran and the UAE. The free flow of oil is crucial. If war were to close the Strait of Hormuz, prices on oil would skyrocket and severely hurt the global economy. Recently, Iran threatened to block the strait unless the US and the UN stopped pressuring Iran to end its nuclear weapons program. To counter Iran, the US has large military forces in and around the Middle East. Bahrain is the headquarters for the US Navy's Fifth Fleet, while the military's Central Command has forces in Persian Gulf countries. Are women oppressed there? Women in most of the Middle East have fewer freedoms than women in the West. According to a 2011 report by the UN, Arab women suffer from inequality of opportunity and are forced to take lower paying jobs and rarely play a role in government. The same is true for women in non Arab parts of the Middle East, such as Iran. Saudi Arabia is particularly tough on women. They are forbidden by law to travel or study without permission from their father, brother, or husband. Women are even barred from driving. Elsewhere, however, in countries like Jordan and Israel, women have much more freedom. According to the UN, According to the UN, women's inequality prevents progress throughout the Middle East. The report notes, quote, society as a whole suffers when a huge proportion of its productive potential is stifled, end quote. You can feel free to go back through this video to help you answer some of the questions that you will be asked uh, coming up in a later document. You can also go back to a lot of the highlighted terms that I've given you here. I've gone through and I tried to highlight the text to also help you kind of zero in on the where you can locate the different answers for this assignment.